Hi, I'm George the Antique Nomad. Come with me as I wander the country in search of valuable vintage, amazing antiques, and cool collectibles. We'll buy, sell, and trade at antique malls, shops, and shows, estate sales, flea markets, thrift stores, anywhere people go to find really interesting things that just aren't made anymore. So come on, let's go! One really cool thing about driving the Blue Line highways between antique towns, because a lot of antique towns are little cities that have readapted by becoming antique centers, so you get off the main freeway, is you find out really cool, interesting history about places you would never have imagined. This monument in the middle of a back road in Kentucky talks about the Night Rider movement, and the Night Riders were a group of vigilantes who were rallying against the tobacco concerns that were monopolizing everything and not paying them fairly. And it created quite a fractious division in the area because some people were afraid to buck the system and other people were very adamant that you must. And so the Black Patch Wars were the result. And this tells a little bit about it right here. So we didn't get to go everywhere with the group in Cadiz, and I wanted to come back and show you everything in the town because it's a really great town full of antiques and vintage. One thing resellers should look for are consignment stores, and this is one I've never been in before, so I'm excited to get here. Consignment World says it's thrifts, antiques, furniture, and more. And the nice thing about a consignment store is you get a lot of variety because they take things in from a lot of different people. It's not usually priced at a full retail price. And you'll see all sorts of different things in here. I'm, of course, looking for antiques and vintage, but you folks who do other types of thrift selling will definitely see things you'll think, oh, he should have stopped and looked at that. So you'll have to come here yourself. On the way in the door, by the way, since they didn't get to see it, I just wanted to show off for Fatbird Finds. I found your cousin here, and it's $16. Well, right off the get-go, we have a nice, this is not going to be easy to see because it's a faint mark, but this is a General Electric piece. This is Hall China, and this is from about 1940. This is when you would buy a good refrigerator. It would have Hall China pieces built to go in it. So this came with your refrigerator, and so it has a General Electric mark on it. And it's only priced at $10. Hall China is really good quality, and there are people who collect the refrigerator ware specifically, so I think I'm going to get that. So right off the bat, we found something. This is a McCoy piece, and you usually see it with some sort of a pattern on it, like a fruit transfer. I've seen blue and white on here. I've seen it in other colors, but I recognize the blank. And when you look at the bottom, these were done about 1970, so it's got the smaller McCoy mark that you see around that time. McCoy, of course, was an Ohio pottery, and in this era, their quality really was getting a lot better, and that's how they survived into the 1970s and I believe into the early 80s. The early 80s were a really tough time for American companies. A lot of them went out of business that made the housewares that we collect now, and McCoy was one of those. It's priced at $25, and for someone who loves it, that's a good price. For resale, that isn't something I can do. This display might be interesting to folks because these are the Coke bottles from the 1930s that Raymond Loewy designed for them. He redesigned and really put the Coke bottle curve together. He's one of my favorite industrial designers, but these are mostly local pieces. All these little towns had bottling companies, and so on the bottom it says what town they're from. Some of the little bottling companies weren't around very long, and there's a lot of small regionals in here. You've got Evansville, Indiana, which was big, West Palm Beach, Florida, New York, but then you've got places like Russellville, Kentucky, which is a little town here, Aberdeen, Mississippi. There are Coke bottle collectors who really look for the obscure bottling companies, and there are a few that are rather valuable. My cousin's a bottle digger, and he just found a 1911 bottle from St. Petersburg, Florida, when St. Pete was a little town of about 10,000 people and there weren't very many tourists, and it's worth something like $100. So that's something to check out if you find Coke bottles. This store is divided up into individual mall spaces as well, it seems, and this one has a lot of collectible glass. Wow, I see something I really like over here, but we'll have to take a look. These are treasure craft, but they have the mushrooms on them. And this was popular right about 1970. They took this tree trunk and then they would do the mushrooms as the design in the blank. And this was the lava glaze that they originally did on their 1960s Hawaiian pottery. But by the 70s, they were trying to figure out how to extend the life of their kitchenware lines, which were starting to go out of style. So they started doing the mushrooms. And the 3 canisters here are priced at $38, which is about $13 a piece. When I wrote the book, that was about what these things were going for, but everyone has really gotten crazy about the mushrooms, so I'm going to have to look up and see what prices are now. It may actually be something to buy. And then for the true antique fans out there, we've got a couple of pieces of Goofus glass. Now these are a good contrast because this one shows what usually happened to Goofus glass. It wore off because if you look at the bottom, it was fired on. So it wasn't in the glass, it was painted on the glass. But this one has not lost its color because it didn't have color on the bottom. So all of the color was on the grapes and the leaves. This one's really in rather good shape. And we see the grapes and the roses pretty prominently. There are other patterns in Goofus. But the grape, because it's in good condition, priced at $18, is a pretty reasonable price. I think the reason Goofus doesn't sell for more for these types of pieces is because people are afraid of the wear. But if you like the colors, and I find them attractive, it's really a pretty cool piece, and it's a big one. These 2 little wall pockets, well, they're not very little actually, they're kind of heavy. They're both the birds, and they are both Royal Hager. Now, Royal Hickman only worked for Hager specifically for a short period of time, but then he came back and did a lot of additional designs for them. I believe these are in the 1950s when he wasn't their in-house designer anymore, but he was a contributor and a contractor.
He was an outhouse designer.
He was an outhouse designer, yes, that's right. It was actually supposed to be a birdhouse, but I guess it's also an outhouse because it has a moon. You get the variegation in the glazes, and that's definitely a Hager trademark. Hager also was really heavy, almost right up to the end. They made large and heavy pieces, and the reason for that was that they figured that the importers couldn't match that because imports had to be lighter and poorer quality, and so that was Hager's real claim to fame in the marketplace. And then I got to show this because when I was a very little kid, this was a very popular show. Emergency. They were firemen and they did very, very dramatic things, and I remember sitting on my father's lap and being very, very on edge the entire show because it was just so exciting.
912 ambulance, 75-year-old male, back pain. It's 211 Silver Hollow Road between Lane Road and Crosspatch Road.
I tried watching it again a few years ago, and it didn't have the same effect that it did on a 5-year-old, but it still was a lot of fun. Here's some desk phones. The green was a very popular color about 1965, priced at $27. That's really not a bad price at all. And then this one we need to show because this one is very collectible, and it came in some really poppy colors as well as this brown. We see the brown more often, but it's the donut rotary phone. This is priced about $50. I think that's about retail price, but you can see on the bottom a lot of times these are dated. And this one has a date that says 78, so this is 1978. It's a really fun design, and the modernists are really crazy for these. I sell them every time I get them. Here's a little typewriter ribbon tin. If you go to Trusty Huckster Mercantile or Vintage and Vinyls YouTubes, you'll see that she is a big collector of these typewriter ribbon tins, and she's got a great assortment of them. This one's a fairly common one, but some of them have really cool graphics. They're not a very expensive thing to collect, and they're very useful because it's just really a little tin you can use for anything. This one is $2, which is very inexpensive. If it was in better shape or a little more exciting, I would definitely grab it, but I have a feeling someone will for that price. Some nice pink depression glass, and behind it I see something I want to show. This is Russell Wright. This is Iroquois Modern. He made these for Iroquois. There's the mark on the bottom. Iroquois by Russell Wright. This is the stacking cream and sugar. This again shows the reason that he's considered such a good designer. The way that these stack on each other so it keeps the sugar from getting anything in it, and the creamer rests on top. It doesn't take up as much space on the table or in the cupboard. just a really logical design. The Iroquois was what he did after the American Modern. American Modern was nicely designed, but it didn't hold up as well. This is much thicker and the glazes are a lot heavier. So these can hold up to modern wear, especially if you have family use. They're really heavy like cafe china, and they're only $8 for the set. I get about $24 for these sets in Florida where the Modernists shop, so I am definitely getting that set. And we've always got to show the moose, although that's probably, well, no, it actually is a moose rather than elk. These were very popular around 1910 particularly, and it wasn't just because of the Elks Lodge forming as an organization. It's a motif that people really liked. I think it was the alternative to the cow creamer. There's another one here, but this one looks a lot newer to me. And we look at the bottom, it's got a very shiny, glossy glaze. So my guess is that this one is some sort of a reproduction from the 1960s or 70s. Reproduction may not be an accurate word there. It may not be copying anything specifically other than the style. But this one in the brown is definitely from about 1910. And they have it priced at $15, which is a pretty good deal. Doesn't this have a good color? It's just so bright and vibrant. This is a Windsor Stove, and it's a little later than you might think. It looks even older, but this would have been a gas stove from about 1930. These were sold in the Montgomery Ward catalog at that time. And this would have been something that you would have seen in places that still really didn't have electricity. So finding it in Kentucky is actually a little more expected, because a lot of houses in Kentucky were still using gas power and light in the 1920s and 30s until the TVA came along. It's a nice compact size. They do have a really high price on it, I have to say. They have it priced over $1,200, and honestly, I think they should sell for about a third of that. But it is a neat look, and if you were going to do a kitchen around it, or if you had a rustic cabin, or you wanted to do a display, it's just a great color to work with. On the other hand, I just noticed over here, if this is old, like I think it is, ooh, and it's $15 for 11 pieces? I think I've got to get these. This is Harlequin. This is a Fiesta-like pattern, but you notice the rings are all at the bottom. Harlequin was actually designed by Frederick Reed, who did the Fiesta pieces, and made for Homer Laughlin, but it was made to be sold by the Woolworths company in their stores. It wasn't something that every store could order. So it was a less expensive alternative to Fiesta ware at that time. And then the other plates look like Bauer pottery to me. Let's see if any of them have a mark. Yes, it's very hard to see, but it says Bauer, Los Angeles. Bauer was a fellow who in the 1870s started a crockery company in Paducah, Kentucky, and very few people realize that there's a Kentucky connection for Bauer. This one has a better mark, and by about 1930, Bauer had moved to Los Angeles and established themselves as a maker of sewer tile and roof tiles and chimneys, and they decided to come out in the beginning of the Depression with this ringware. And the ring has become very popular with modernist collectors. It's been a big deal ever since people started collecting Art Deco in the 1970s. These seem to be in really good shape, and I can't believe the entire stack of this is only $15, because these should sell for probably $15 a piece, the dinner plates, and maybe $20 or $25 for the pitcher. So this is a nice find. I'm very excited about this. Great colors too.
Dishes. You're excited about dishes.
I'm surprised to be excited about dishes because we come into them a lot, but we don't come into Bauer anymore. Most of this is in collections. They started the ring pattern, by the way, 6 years before Fiesta ware. So Fiesta really, Frederick Reed was really copying the success of Bauer when he created Fiesta ware. So this is the first. So while I'm thinking of it, please comment in the space below here, and also hit the thumbs up button to like this video. If you haven't subscribed, click the subscribe button below. Also hit the bell below to be notified of new videos coming every Monday and Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern. And thank you so much for following along. Let's go back to this video. This place is actually really big. It's surprisingly large. I didn't really look this big from the road. I've been wanting to come here for a long time, and I'm glad I have, because it seems like there's a lot of different things to see. Old galvanized feeder for $24. A lot of people are using those for other purposes now. I see some old license plates. Ooh, Safety Pays, Indiana, 1962. It's priced at $18. It's in pretty good shape, and that's probably top range, but people who have old cars are looking to restore those, and Studebakers, which I loved and drove for years, were made in Indiana. As you can see, this is truly a consignment store. It's a thrift store. There's lots of other things to buy here besides antiques and vintage. Let's take a look at these and see if these are recent or older Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck plates here. They're dished in the ears, and this was to keep the food separate. You know how kids are about not wanting their food to mush together. Actually, a lot of adults are that way too. This looks like something that was made by a home ceramicist, and it's pretty well done. It's pretty cute, but I usually only buy the Disney items that are marked with Walt Disney Productions, because that's what my collectors are looking for. These sherbet glasses here, they're only $8 for the set. This is Fostoria's Jamestown pattern from the 1970s. This is sort of a purpley brown tone, more to the purple, and the purple's a fairly desirable color in this. People tend to like the drinkware. Sherbets don't sell as well nowadays because most people don't serve ice cream this way. We're, well, frankly, fatter nowadays, and we want more, and that just isn't enough for most people. So I don't really buy a lot of sherbets anymore. Ah yes, The Way We Were, a very popular Barbra Streisand song in the 1970s. When Jure became very popular for the copper wall hangings, a whole lot of Me Too came along. And one of those Me Too products were these. A lot of them were little sculptures, tabletop, and things that could play music. They're a lot thinner than the Jure, but they're kind of fun, and people are starting to collect them again. And you can see on the bottom the label here. There were several companies that made these. This particular one was made in Hong Kong. A lot of stuff in the 70s was made in Hong Kong. That was before we had open trade with China, so Hong Kong was a source for inexpensive goods that looked like things that were made in America. So we've got an Irish coffee cup from the 1970s. Irish coffee became a really popular drink right around 1970, and everybody started making Irish coffee mugs, and then they started selling them as souvenirs. So you see things we find in Kentucky: a cardinal, Cumberland Falls, the Capitol, the old Kentucky home in Bardstown, and of course the one Kentucky stereotype that the state just can't shake, which is hillbillies, but they're playing fiddle. And of course this is the home of bluegrass and a lot of good country music, so in that regard, it's a good stereotype. This set here is a company that we don't see in this part of the country very often, but I'm familiar from the West Coast. It's Winfield China. And this is the earlier mark when you see the script here. Winfield produced in Pasadena, and then they moved to another town in the Los Angeles area. And these hand-painted tropical flower patterns were very popular with 1950s buyers. And here we go, handcraft, Winfield China, California. The ones that say Pasadena are actually a little more collectible. And this set with the creamer, sugar, and pitcher is $12, which is really a good price. I'm not going to pick them up because I don't have a current buyer, but I'll bet they would sell online. So at the beginning of this store, I showed the white McCoy pitcher and mentioned that they often had a fruit transfer. Well, this would have been a companion piece, and this is how that white pitcher usually was decorated. The top would have been brown, and it would have this transfer on it. This is a canister. It's only $9. It's McCoy from about 1970 again, with that same mark. And there are people starting to collect the McCoy from this era. And then below here, these seem very 1970s to me. We'll see if they really are, but they certainly have all of the 70s household colors. Orange, harvest gold, and avocado, and they are marked Japan. So indeed they are going to be from about 1970. They're kind of cute. I like the high contrast with the stylized fruit and florals on it. They're only $1.50 a piece. I am certain that Crazy Lamp Lady would buy those and a lot of other folks. I don't really sell coffee mugs so much, but someone's going to come in here and get a good deal. Well, one of our viewers, Constellation Pegasus, sent me a picture of his collection of these, and this one's in good shape, and it's on sale, so it is $7.50, so I'm going to get it. I have seen these. I have actually never owned one before because I've had trouble finding them in good shape, but this is Napco ware from about 1970 again, and they were really trying to be more literal with the way the fish looked. Napco, which was National Potteries Company, was an importer in Cleveland, Ohio, so this actually was made in Japan, even though it doesn't have that mark. It probably had a paper label that was taken off that said made in Japan. So we have the classic hens on nest, which are popular again in some quarters, and I wanted to show this one particularly because it looks on the surface like it would be really old. It's satin glass. When you lift the lid though, in the inside it has an I through a G, and that is for Imperial Glass Company. They were in Bel Air, Ohio. And Imperial in the late 60s and early 70s started doing in their own colors with a little variation so that you wouldn't get confused, but they started doing reproductions of the Victorian era pieces, and the collectors at first were furious, but Imperial was pretty respectful over time to make sure that you could tell the difference. If you were here in person with me and you felt this, you'd realize it's kind of got a, if I don't break it, a slick aspect to it. The lid has also got the same IG mark, and so there's no mistaking this for old if you know what to look for. And it's only priced at $6.95, so I imagine that somebody will love it. And we'll see if I can get it back in one piece. So we have kitty cats, and these were very popular in the 80s and 90s actually, and people are really loving them again. It's bigger than a full-size actual cat. They're priced really reasonably. Now, I'm not going to get them, and everyone's going to say, why aren't you buying those? Everyone loves them. Well, first of all, this must weigh 20 or 25 pounds. It's very heavy, HO in Mexico, and they were done of a very heavy plaster, like a lot of Mexican plasterware, and they tended to chip easily, and these do have chips on the ears. So that's why I'm leaving the kitty, even though it's only $5, but it's a good kitty. The middle one is a lot lighter, so it'd be easier to ship, and it has glass eyes that are applied, but I believe it's a lot newer. And this one was also made by somebody in a ceramics class, and that's why it's a lot thinner, because typically homemade ceramics, the pour is very short. The ceramics like this are made by pouring into a mold, and then you let it harden, and then as it starts to harden from the outside, you pour out the middle, and that's why you end up with a big empty cavity. And they don't let them harden very hard because the places you go to do this sort of stuff, it costs money for that material, so they don't let them go really thick. And so that's why usually a handmade piece will be lightweight, and that's why I'm not going to get this one either, because it's not something that's a manufactured piece that I think would sell for more. Although I'll bet somebody would disagree and think it was a great deal also for $5. So this set definitely is going to be California Originals. I haven't seen this set before, but you can just tell because they like to do this Hollywood Regency gold. They did these variegated glazes, and they always were these big, chunky, sort of strangely biomorphic designs. And so this has the lid that comes off. It looks like it's in good shape. It doesn't say Cal Originals there, but we haven't looked at the bottom yet. That would be where you would have kept possibly cigarettes, or more likely tobacco to be rolled into cigarettes. You've got the little lighter here, which seems like it should work if a flint was put in it. And let's turn over now and see. Yep, sure enough. Cal Originals. This would have been a late 50s, early 60s piece. It's hard to imagine for people now, especially younger people. Almost everybody smoked back in the 1960s and 70s. And this would have been a big party-sized ashtray because in the days of cocktail culture, you'd have a bunch of people over and you needed room for, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 cigarettes burning at one time, and one in your hand. I remember my mother, who thankfully quit after 40 years cold turkey, had a cigarette burning in every room of the house when I was a child. It was almost like incense. Thanks for joining me again in the fun and fascinating antique community here where online meets the real world. Please click the subscribe button below, click the bell to be notified when new videos upload, leave a comment below, and hit thumbs up to like this video. Links to our online social media daily posts and our items for sale are in the description. This is George at the Antique Nomad. Bye for now.